We are facing a serious stress on our resources due to burgeoning populations, environmental degradation and climate change. Aspada, where Sahil Kini is the VP, has focused on investments in the agri and agri-tech sector. Sahil joins us now. Thank you, Sahil, so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're among a handful of VCs in this space. Do you see that changing?
I see a lot more interest in agri and agri-tech in general happening right now. Traditional agriculture, if you will, though it's a very high margin business and it's an excellent business to get into, hasn't usually attracted venture investing simply because venture investing by definition looks for a lot of growth. Right? Rapid growth.
Yeah.
That's what the founding principles of venture investing are all about. But and agriculture has its own cycles and its own dynamics that in most markets don't make much sense. But in India, what we've noticed is agriculture has certain endemic problems that need to be solved. And that still isn't getting enough attention, but agricultural technology, which is satellite imaging, drones, getting data at the farm level on soil moisture, that kind of stuff, that's a very tech angle or a tech approach to agriculture. And we're seeing a lot of VC activity in that space. But in traditional agriculture and agricultural supply chains, which are the more, for lack of a better word, unsexy parts of agriculture, have still not seen that much venture activity. But I think there's a lot of money to be made in that space as well.
Okay. But do you see technology mitigating some of these environmental challenges?
I think there are a lot more fundamental challenges that need to be solved before we get to using technology truly as an enabler. Technology, of course, can boost productivity and do a lot of good for agriculture, but I think the problems in agriculture are much more fundamental. For example, if we are to talk about what it takes to get a kilo of potato from a farm to our table, right? The price at the farm gate, from the price we pay, it's 5x. Between the farm and our table, there are so many middlemen and there's so much wastage in the supply chain. 40% of all of India's food is wasted before it even reaches our tables. So these two things, which is disintermediating the supply chain, which is getting in the middle, cutting out the middlemen, and buying straight from the farmer and selling straight to the end consumer, and implementing cold chain in post-harvest supply chain management. These two factors alone can do a lot. Another aspect I wanted to touch upon, and I think this is the third fundamental problem in agriculture, is the lack of mechanization.
What got you into this kind of very different space in the first place?
Well, people, there's this saying that you don't get into VC, you accidentally fall into it. So I was an entrepreneur and I was building for technology for another often ignored sector of India, which is factories, manufacturing. I come from a manufacturing background, and we were building industrial Internet of Things technology for factories, and that didn't do too well, mostly because, the moment you say manufacturing or agriculture to a VC, they end up running in the other direction. So that venture failed, and somebody I knew very well, Karthik, who's the MD of Aspada, was my senior in IIT Madras. So I got in touch with him, and he said, why don't you come do something at the fund? And I've always been a bit of a old school guy, right? I'm a third generation entrepreneur. My grandfather was a businessman, my father is a businessman, and therefore I've always respected people who've built businesses in problems that are very hard to solve. So agriculture is one of those really, really hard to solve problems. So is manufacturing, for example, or we also invest in healthcare, in education, in financial services. These are all very fundamental problems to India, and nobody's been solving them. And that's what I really liked about Aspada. They're looking at really hard to solve problems and not necessarily at what's the flavor of the season.
If you had to say 5 things to budding entrepreneurs in your space, what would that be?
Persevere. Stick it out. It's a really hard journey. It's a very lonely journey. It's something that most people don't understand. And look, there's ecosystem here, and you feel like you've got support, but really, when you're building a startup and things get tough, you're really on your own. And that time you need courage. You need courage to persevere. You need courage to stick on and say, no, I'm going to make this work. And because your parents will understand to a point, your family will understand to a point, your friends, they'll have nice jobs. In this ecosystem, people are getting paid really well. It's really hard to say no to all of that and say, I'm going to step out and do something on my own. It's hard enough to start doing that, but to persevere until you succeed. So that's the one message that I'd leave with you. Have courage and persevere. I mean, if not in this venture, then in the next. But if you want to build something,
Correct.
you've got to stick it out.
Right. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Sahil.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wanted to know about the delivery boys. How do you get these people? How do you hire them? And what kind of perks do they get? And those
So I'll
things?
tell you, so ultimately that was one of the innovations that we had to do in this particular industry. So Delivery Boy, when we started Roadrunner, from a concept perspective, was a very job or employee kind of a mindset. So they used to work for a particular player, they used to be employed for a day, used to have a salary kind of concept. So we actually changed that. We actually made it more flexible for them, saying that now you don't need to, it's not a job for you, you're kind of like an independent businessman and you're doing delivery as a business.
Would you say that these two particular investments of yours have been outside your comfort zone, and are you happy with these?
So these are not, I would not see, when we were investing, we had this theme that we will invest behind all consumer based companies. What we've realized in last year or two is that tech alone, or consumer tech and enterprise tech alone, has so much depth that as a team we have very limited time to say we can do everything in a right manner. So it's just a question of focus. And while we made these investments, at that time we had focus on these areas. Right now we are not looking to invest more. We are saying enough to do in tech, and that's where we are spending our energies.